You are surrounded by strangers right now. On a street, in a shop, scrolling through a feed full of people you have never met and never will. You don't think about them. You've been conditioned since childhood to treat unknown people as background noise. Neither threat nor ally, just scenery. A modern person can pass more strangers in 1 hour than their great-great-grandparents encountered in a lifetime. Now go back 50,000 years. Your group, your fire, your 30 or 40 people, and a silhouette on the horizon. Moving. Upright. Not an animal. A person. But not your person. Someone you have never seen before. Someone whose name you don't know. Someone whose intentions you cannot read. You have a few seconds to decide what happens next. And the decision you make, your group versus theirs, might determine whether either group survives the next winter. Meeting a stranger was one of the most dangerous moments in ancient human life, and it was also one of the most important, because the groups that figured out how to do it well didn't just survive, they became the ancestors of everyone alive today. Let's start with the fear, because the fear was justified. Archaeological evidence of intergroup violence is well documented across the prehistoric record. Projectile points embedded in bone, skeletal trauma consistent with killing, mass burial sites. At a site called Nadaruk near Lake Turkana in Kenya, researchers led by Marta Mirazone Lar found 27 individuals who had been killed violently, around 10,000 years ago, one of the oldest known evidence of intergroup massacre in human history. This wasn't rare. Strangers could mean death. That was not paranoia. That was history. But here's the other half of the picture. Genetic diversity requires mixing. Small, isolated groups that never made contact with outsiders accumulated harmful mutations within a few generations. Total isolation was its own kind of slow death. And the archaeological record shows something remarkable. Long-distance trade goods, obsidian from specific volcanic sources, shell ornaments, ochre, appear hundreds, sometimes thousands of kilometers from their origin, moving between groups that had never directly met. Anthropologist Robin Dunbar's research established that human beings have a cognitive capacity for close relationships with roughly 150 people. That's the ceiling. Beyond that number, you need formal mechanisms to manage relationships. Meeting a stranger was the first step toward expanding that circle, or dying because you expanded it wrong. On paper, a deeply territorial social primate that evolved in small, tightly bonded groups, where every unfamiliar face had historically been a potential threat, should never have developed the capacity to peacefully approach a stranger. Every instinct said danger. Every piece of evolutionary history said defend. And yet somehow, this species built a social technology sophisticated enough to eventually connect groups across entire continents. So what did they actually do in that first terrifying moment when a stranger appeared on the horizon? Across virtually every documented record of first contact between previously unconnected human groups, a consistent pattern appears. Both groups stop. Not close, not far. Roughly 30 to 50 meters of open ground between them. Far enough that no immediate attack could be decisive. Close enough that both groups are clearly visible to each other. Nobody runs. Nobody charges. Both groups remain stationary, visible, waiting. That pause is doing enormous communicative work. It says, I see you. I am not attacking. I am not fleeing. I am waiting to understand what you are. Ethologists call this appeasement signaling, behavior specifically designed to reduce perceived threat without requiring shared language. The 30 meters of open ground between two groups who have never met is the first word in a conversation that has no language yet. Before they had words for it, they had the idea of neutral ground. The pause before the conversation is older than the conversation. Across virtually every documented first contact protocol, gift-giving appears as a central element. And the logic of it is precise. Giving something of value to a stranger is expensive. It costs you something real. And precisely because it's costly, it's credible as a signal. A group that approaches with a gift has, by definition, reduced its own resources and carried something toward you rather than a weapon. Evolutionary biologists call this a costly signal, a behavior whose cost makes it reliable as honest communication. The gift says, I am spending something to demonstrate I am not here to take from you. Archaeological evidence of long-distance gift exchange, shell ornaments, ochre, carved objects, appears in the record as early as 130,000 years ago in southern Africa. Formalized exchange protocols existed long before settled civilization. Anthropologist Polly Weissner documented something extraordinary among the Jew/Hawanzi of the Kalahari, a practice they called sharo. You give something to someone in a camp far away. Months later, sometimes years later, they give back. Not immediately, not like a trade, like a relationship. These networks stretched hundreds of kilometers between people who might see each other once every few years, creating threads between camps across the distances that would otherwise leave each group completely isolated and dependent on their own resources to survive every bad season. The gift wasn't generosity, it was communication. The most expensive, most credible message a human can send. I am choosing to make myself poorer to show you I mean no harm. In the 1960s, psychologist Paul Ekman began a research program that would eventually span decades and dozens of cultures. His question was simple. Are facial expressions universal? Or are they learned differently in different cultures? He tested isolated groups, people who had had no contact with Western television, film, or photography, people who had never seen a face outside their own community. He showed them photographs of facial expressions and asked them to identify what they saw. Across every culture tested, the same 6 expressions were recognized the same way: happiness, sadness, anger, fear, disgust, surprise. Not learned, not cultural, biological. And among those 6, one mattered more than any other for the moment of first contact: the genuine smile. Not the polite smile, the one that uses only the mouth. The Duchenne smile, the one that contracts the muscles around the eyes, the one that reaches them. Ekman found that people across all cultures could reliably distinguish a genuine smile from a fake one, without being told how, without learning the difference. They already knew. 2 people from groups that have never met, not a single word in common. When one of them smiles, a real smile reaching the eyes, the other one knows. Not because they were taught, not because they read it in a book, because this knowledge is older than books, older than language, older than any culture either of them has ever belonged to. The smile is older than the word for smile. It was the first word humans had in common with everyone, including people they had never met. Across virtually every documented hunter-gatherer society, marriage between groups, not just within them, appears as a structured, deliberate mechanism. Anthropologist Claude Lévi-Strauss argued that the exchange of spouses between groups is the foundational structure of human society, more fundamental even than economic trade, because it creates kin networks that make future violence between groups biologically costly. You do not attack your cousin's group. You do not raid the people your sister married into. You have someone you love on the other side of that border. Picture a young woman leaving her camp to join another, not as a prisoner, as a bride. The group she's leaving gains access to resources, knowledge, and protection from the group she's joining. And her children, born into that new group, will be related to both.
If conflict ever breaks out between these groups, there will be people on both sides who remember that, who have family on both sides, who have reasons, personal and immediate, to prefer peace. She is not just a person moving between camps. She is a living treaty. Ancient DNA evidence confirms this pattern across all of human prehistory. Intergroup mating didn't just happen occasionally. It happened continuously in almost every population studied, across almost every time period. They didn't just make peace with strangers. They made family out of them. And that turned out to be the only peace that lasted. Here's what changes how you see everything you just heard. These protocols worked. Distance, gifts, faces, marriage. 4 elegant solutions to the most dangerous social problem in prehistory. They worked so well and are so deeply embedded in human biology that they now misfire constantly. The racing heart before you walk into a room full of strangers, the sweaty palms before a first meeting, the hyper-consciousness of what your face is doing, the way your brain replays the conversation afterwards, checking for mistakes. This is not a personal failing. This is the ancient first contact software running on full alert in a situation where the stakes are, for the first time in human history, almost entirely trivial. Your brain cannot tell the difference between meeting a stranger at a cocktail party and meeting a stranger on the African savanna 50,000 years ago. The threat assessment software is identical. The physiological response is identical. Only the actual stakes are different. Evolutionary psychologists describe this as mismatch. Ancient hardware running in a modern environment it was never designed for. The nervousness you feel before a job interview.
The self-consciousness of entering a room where you know no one. That is the original human experience of the stranger. Unmodified, unmedicated, running exactly as designed. Just in a world where almost nothing it was designed for is actually happening anymore. You're back on that street. Same strangers, same background noise. But now you know what's underneath the indifference. The ability to walk through a city full of strangers without triggering a full threat assessment response is not evolution. It's conditioning, something you learn to suppress. The ancient software is still underneath it, and every time it surfaces, the cocktail party anxiety, the first day of work nerves, the self-consciousness of walking into a room where you don't know a single person, that is the original human experience of the stranger, unmasked, exactly as your ancestors felt it every time a silhouette appeared on the horizon. They didn't have the luxury of treating strangers as background noise. Every unknown face was a calculation. Every encounter was a negotiation. And they built the tools to survive it. 4 tools. So precise, so effective, that 50,000 years later, they still live in your body. In the space you leave between yourself and someone you've just met. In the gift you bring to a first dinner. In the smile that reaches your eyes without you deciding to let it. Every handshake, every smile, every gift you've ever given a stranger. You didn't invent those. You inherited them. From people who faced a stranger across an open field 50,000 years ago and had to decide, in about 3 seconds, whether to run, fight, or try something almost no other animal had ever attempted. They tried talking, and the world was never the same.